I will just run through some more bits of this first priority before I move on to the next ones, because I'm conscious of time. A separate bit about communication is specifically within health and care, because that's a really key part, and it goes back to that quote about the lady who was giving birth. So it's about setting up a group to really look closely at what support needs are required in terms of communication within healthcare. And another one of the actions that we're proposing is this idea of care coordinators, which exist already for children with complex needs, but not for adults. And it's this sense that if you do, I'm not sure what's going on there, the phone will behave. I'll just carry on and hope it disappears.
I think there's a phone going on.
Yeah, well, hopefully it'll stop soon. If it doesn't bother anyone too much, I'll just carry on. So actually, if you do have complex needs, the reality is that you'll be dealing with many different departments within health, both in Jersey but potentially off island as well. And that's a time-consuming, difficult task. And actually, if there was someone who could sort of smooth that process for you, it could help. And finally, I touched on earlier about using technology and innovation to improve communication. So there's lots of things already that support people to use technology and get online. And it's about making sure that the right people are hooked up with the right programs. So whether that's as simple as going to the library and getting their training sessions, or using commercial initiatives such as Barclays have their Digital Eagles program, which again helps people, particularly old people, with getting familiar with technology. The next priority within the strategy is about having greater access to the island. So this is often the sort of bread and butter of disability strategies, but it's no less important for that. This is about the physical access of getting to places you need to go and moving about whilst you're in there. So that affects housing, public transport, public buildings, and well, the best bit of Jersey, I think, the natural environment. Again, I put a couple of quotes up there. An older lady, a stroke survivor, lives in the deepest, darkest Trinity, and she said that unless her son drives her, she can't get out and about. So if there was a way of supporting her, just even to go to the shops without him, it would make a big difference to her life. And then a female amputee and blue badge holder talks about the blue badge scheme. And said, I can afford to pay for parking like everyone else, but what I need is to be able to park where I need to park, in the centre of town. So I need it to be a suitable size space, and I need it to be close to where I need to go. That's my priority. In terms of a few results from the survey, so 41% of disabled islanders had difficulty travelling around the island. 31% experienced difficulty just moving around in their own home. And almost 40% of disabled islanders report to experience difficulty moving around other places and other buildings. So what could we do about that? The first area is about transport, things that are suitable and affordable. The implementation of a bus pass scheme is imminent. I don't know if any of you attended the Jersey Disability Partnership meeting the other day, but that's something that is going to be announced in less than a month, that's coming in. A pilot scheme for that. I think the idea of the strategy is actually to make sure that the what is introduced is suitable. So to, like I said, that's a pilot scheme.
System.
Yes, like the Avanci card.
Yeah, you show the driver this
Yeah.
card, and he knows then that you have a disability without you saying,
Yes,
I can't.
exactly. So it's sort of
Brilliant.
similar to the older person's pass and also the younger people's passes as well. But what we want to check with the strategy is that it hits the right people and does what we need it to do.
Just on that, in terms of the UK decision about the disabled person on the bus this week or last week,
this week,
is it the same in Jersey that disabled people are entitled to have that disabled seat and no other
Yes, I think it is. Yes.
Yeah, take that
There's a
on.
notice in the buses.
Priority.
There's spaces for disabled.
Yeah.
Priority. Yes, they are.
Other thoughts are about accessibility around the town centre. I think that's something that you touched on earlier, whether that's actually going down the street, and the street furniture and pavements, whether it's going into shops themselves. And again, going back to the quote that I mentioned, it's about looking at the blue badge scheme and what that means. And then referring to the quote from the lady from Trinity, at the moment there are volunteer driver schemes on the island. I understand that St Clement's does an excellent one,
Trinity has one.
and Trinity as well, which works well for people. But that is only parts of the island, and actually what we think is that wherever you live on the island, you should be able to access a similar kind of scheme.
Again, just a couple of things on like car parks in town. Minden Place, if you're in a wheelchair, you can't use the lifts because there's a 1 foot high plinth outside every single lift door on every floor. If you ever tried going up that sloping floors in a wheelchair in Minden Place, you realise you can't do it. Sand Street has just spent an awful lot of money renovating itself, all nice paint job everywhere. Several occasions, several people have asked that one of the machines for checking out your car is put at a lower level so you can reach it when you're sitting in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
Yes, we're going to do that when we do all the renovations. Did anything happen? No.
I think those machines are damaged at some street.
Well, sometime or other, but
Yeah,
it's
they,
not
they
happens.
want to do it with the right way of
Yeah.
mobile.
But again, what do? You ask, you tell, you inform, and nothing happens.
Yeah. And again, it goes back to that two-way thing of actually you need the
You know,
legislation to
but
keep
you
people at
be
the bar.
beating your head against a brick wall all the time.
One of the other, I've just skipped down to the last bit about access. Another thing that we're proposing is having a reference group, so kind of an authority group, which you may well want to, as and when it comes into fruition, be a part of. Which is about talking about the kind of real life needs of public buildings and spaces. So whilst buildings may or may not comply with accessibility standards, actually there's some simple things that just as a user, you know, if you think about it in advance, can improve things. And your example with the car parking machine is an excellent one. Small things, for example, it's been pointed out, for people with vision impairments, often buildings are made where there's a light switch, and then because of the electricity next to it is the fire alarm. And that's just not helpful for someone who has difficulty seeing, because they don't want to stress about turning the light on every day and pressing the wrong switch. But if people could factor those in advance before the renovations or building work done, then it's much easier than rectifying it at a later stage.
Yeah, okay. For new buildings now, there is a law in Jersey which must allow for disabled access, level floors and that sort of thing. But to give you a classic example, this week, Jersey Post has just opened up a new branch in the Jersey Evening Post offices. I phoned up Jersey Evening Post yesterday because this is following on discussions I've had with them over the last 2 years, and said, now you've got a Jersey Post office, do you have disabled access into the building? No. Why not? Because we can't get permission to put a ramp outside the door. Yes, you can. No, you can't. Now, I've spoken to the editor of the JP about 2 years ago. This was in the car park on a rainy day, because I couldn't get into the building. He happened to be walking out to go to a meeting, and I stopped him. And we had a chat and got both wet. Again, it's very degrading for a disabled person to have to do that. The post office, when they rang me last night, which they did very quickly, apologised that they can't give access. And I said, why can't you? You're a public institution, not a private company, so I can understand the JP saying no, but not Jersey Post. That's not going to happen. And now we're going to have to press it. Now, if you want companies and public institutions to do something about the disabled strategy, if we could get some situations like this classic one, as is tourism this week, to do something now, rather than wait for another 2 years before the disability awareness forces them to do something, wouldn't that be a good thing for everybody? But you want to see the amount of work you've got to do and the amount of aggression that you've got to create
To affect that change.
to affect it.
Yeah.
Can I just say something here? You will make very little impact on any of the existing buildings or the built environment which requires money spending on it, because there isn't going to be money available. The worst public building for access in Jersey is the planning office.
Yep.
Now, the planning office is the one department which has powers to enforce regulations about accessibility. Their own building is an absolute disgrace, and it's been like that forever. Now, if that own department is not prepared to put their own house in order, that should tell you something about the lack of will. It's the lack of will and lack of knowledge, but it's the lack of money. Now, even having a disability officer, if it costs money, you won't get one. That's the fact of the matter.
Yeah.
You
So-
will not get one.
No disrespect to what you're doing, but there's an awful lot of people I know in this room who've had years, decades of experience of trying to do exactly what you're doing now. And as the gentleman just said, the same thing crops up. As soon as it gets down to talking about spending money on it, the answer is no.
And I think that's why this is such a critical time, because things are coming to a head in terms of the legislation is imminent, and once we have legislation, that's when things can change, because they have to change.
This is why it's last on the list.
Because
Because it's so expensive.
It's expensive, it's
Why don't
complicated.
they have some sort of grant system that would be people offered buildings could use to, if they can't afford to do it, genuinely can't afford to do it, apply for a grant, get a grant, pay it back over time.
Well, again, it's something that when the legislation is being developed, that the kind of things that need to be looked at. It's not just the legislation in isolation, it's about how things change.
Take the JP building, the situation.
Yeah.
JP want to do it, have done always. Geton Group, which own the JP, want to do it. They've had board meetings about it, and they've suggested they want to do it. They know where to do it. Then they speak to the company that owns the Geton Group, which is a UK company. They've said no. Now, you can put legislation in Jersey as long as you like, but unless it actually applies to the UK companies, which, by the way, are under legislation in the UK. If they wanted to try and do that in the UK, they couldn't do it. But you see the roots.
But yes, but in that example, obviously the physical building is in Jersey. So as and when it's obviously a morally wrong stance for that company, if I understand the full facts. But as and when there is legislation in Jersey, they wouldn't be able to maintain that position. So
This is what they told me,
Yeah.
and they'll wait until the legislation comes. Well, they didn't.
which again, if we can get a disability officer
Yeah.
sooner rather than later, then obviously they don't have legislation yet, but they can try and speed things up so things happen before
Well,
that.
there's a classic one for you to start on. So go on.
There we go. Well, should we
Can
speak
I-
about
can I
that? I
just-
think we should speak about that offline. I can
Yeah.
look into that. a bit
Just
more.
also, just point out, Joe, you've referred to transport. Every few months you hear a hullabaloo going on about the lack of safety on roads, especially in the country parishes. And there's always this campaign, it's currently going on now, about reducing the speed limit all island to 30 miles an hour. That's free. It doesn't cost anything to do that. What really needs doing is, of course, you need pavements and lighting. That's the thing which affects people with disabilities the most, is the lack of safety on the roads, the structures themselves. And obviously that's something which will never, ever be dealt with, because people won't spend the money on increasing the road widths, making pavements, taking space off farmers' fields and putting in lighting schemes. They'll just say, reduce it to 30 miles an hour, as though that's going to solve it. It won't touch the problem.
I mean, that's something that has changed in some areas. So the village improvements in St Mary, for example, have changed things. But again, that's something in terms of responding to the consultation and telling me these things, that if that is a key issue in terms of pavement infrastructure.
There's a restriction of 50 miles an hour in country lanes. If they reduce it any further, my wheelchair will be able to go faster.
You'll be against the law.
Does Guernsey have a disability officer?
They have a strategy. They have someone who is responsible for implementing the strategy. Whether or not their title is disability officer or not, I'm not sure.
That would be the equivalent.
But that would be the equivalent.
So they already have.
Yeah, because they had their strategy in place. I think it was 2014. I might be wrong on that. Don't quote me. But for a couple of years they've had the strategy.
They haven't got the
That's
legislation
the
of
sort of
that.
thing which strikes me the islands could share. All the buildings are, both islands got problems with buildings. And sort of, the person who's doing the same job in both islands, they don't need a separate one. So they have the same responsibility as long as there's, Jersey's obviously going to need more of that person for a while until it gets all sorted out.
We speak regularly to the kind of equivalents in Guernsey about their progress. I mean, I think in terms of actually disability officer, there probably would be too much for one person to do in both islands.
Maybe initially.
They wouldn't
But
have
yeah.
legislated it.
Well, yeah, like you say, 20 years time maybe when we've got somewhere, then that could make a change. But for now, I think there'd probably be enough work for just one island.
Of course, they did, the Guernsey Disability Alliance did have the initiative to actually elect their own they had an election of those deputies who had been elected to be their spokesman in the States. So they have now, for the past 5 years or so, had a deputy delegated to speak on disability issues.
Yeah. I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to move on to the next priority, have good health and well-being